Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, and praise the Lord, all the students. I welcome you all once again to our Saturday Old Testament class, which is going to be held from 10 o'clock to 12 o'clock Malaysia time. And I would like to welcome Brother Timothy, who is going to take our class today, who is going to teach you all today. And I would like to request all our students. Another thing which is when we are posting something on the group chat, WhatsApp group chat, I would like to request all our students to at least take note on the announcement that we are making, and acknowledge the message. I really appreciate that. So thank you, and I would like to pass this time to Brother Timothy with a word of prayer. Time is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Sister Michelle, for this time. So before we start our class, which will be dealing with the book of Second Chronicles and the book of Ezra, we will like to look to God in prayer so that God can give us enough wisdom and knowledge and understanding in understanding these books. So let us pray. Our most and gracious God, we thank you for giving us this time. We thank you for you being with us throughout the rest of the day, and you have given us this wonderful opportunity to learn from your word, which is the journey to the Old Testament, O Lord. We pray that you'll give us enough wisdom, enough knowledge, and as we listen to the lecture, we pray that you'll give us capacity and the potentiality that we may be able to listen well and able to grasp your word so that we may be able to have a missional value towards your kingdom here on earth. Be with us as we listen to the lecture and continue to bless us, for we bless you, Lord, and ask this prayer in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, I'll do a screen sharing once. Some kind of a problem with my laptop. Hold on once. I think I have to do the screen sharing from here. Just hold on for 1 second. I beg your pardon for the delay. I hope you can see now. Can you see it? Yep, yeah, I can see. Yeah, good. Okay, friends, we will start a class with we'll be dealing with the book of Second Chronicles and the book of Ezra. And the structure of this class, Sis Michelle, can you remove the other one from, yeah, thank you. The structure of the class will be like this. We will be doing the authorship. We will questioning who is the author of the Second Chronicles, and then we will move with the structure. Okay, the outline, which means the outline, which we will be dealing in a skeleton graph, and then from there we will move with the historical and the cultural context of the book, and then we will move to the theological themes of the book. We will end with how it relates with the New Testament. For both of the books, we will be doing in that order. So we will be starting with Second Chronicles, in which we will be starting by questioning the authorship, or who is the author. As you all know, that Second Chronicles, if you look upon it, it has its basis on when the author wrote it, it has its basis mostly on Solomon. Now, when we talk about the authorship of Second Chronicles, we have to put it in this way, that it is as the same as that of the First Chronicles. The reason, okay, that this book is as the same as that of the First Chronicle is that the First and the Second Chronicle is a single book in the Hebrew canon. Now, listen to me carefully here. What does that mean when I say it is a single book in the Hebrew canon? I hope you have finished in your previous class the canonization of the Bible. And I think you have been doing what is a Palestinian canon and what is an Alexandria canon. Now, a Palestinian canon, it is a Hebrew canon where only the Jewish people, read this kind of a Bible. And for us who studied Old Testament, we have to deal with this kind of a Bible known as, in today's world, it is known as Biblica Hebraica Stuttgartanja, which is in German, okay? But what is interesting about this canon is that these two books are one book. There is no such things as First and Second Chronicle in this Hebrew canon. It is just one book. But if you ask when that division of First and Chronicle comes, the division of this book comes only with the Alexandria canon, which is the canon that is happening in Egypt. And we are not sure. If you try to look the reason of why they divide the book, we are not sure. But when you try to go in depth a bit, you'll try to see that there is this probability that the reason that they try to divide the book is because they look at these books, First Chronicles and Second Chronicles, as a historical books, in which when we talk about historical books, it is a book of records that they try to record. They try to record what? They try to record about the leftover things. Now, what does it mean when I say the leftover things? Now, when you talk about this leftover thing, we know that in the book, in the history of the Bible, or in the Bible as a whole, we have how many books in history as a historical books? We have First Kings, Second Kings, First Chronicles, Second Chronicles. Some even considered even from the time of the book of Joshua and the book of Judges. So when I say that this book records about the leftover things, it means that it records those things which those First Kings and Second Kings are not recorded at all. Okay, they are not recorded at all. And then Second Chronicles is, if we have to say that it is a book that records the leftover things, it is a book that records about Solomon, the history of Solomon. It begins with that. They add more on what Solomon is doing. And number two is that they add more with what the Southern Kingdom or Judah history is all about. Now, what is interesting here is that, uh, as you all know, what the reason why they add Judah and they add Southern Kingdom is because the book of Chronicles is mostly a book that give importance to the Judah kingdom or the southern kingdom of Israel. You know that, after Solomon there is a big division, right? There is a big division of the kingdom. One is the northern kingdom, and the other two is the southern kingdom. So this book is focusing more on the southern kingdom. We will look later on that one when we move forward with the structure. So, but this does not define who is the author of Chronicles. I think when you do the recap, if you do some recapitulations from the past class about the First Chronicles, you might have come up with the idea that most of the author scholars, they considered this book as the chroniclers as the author. They considered these chroniclers as the author of this first and the Second Chronicles. And the argument is that for them, they said that these chroniclers, they are the people who even write, or we can say who said to have written a continuous work, even to the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. What I mean to say here is that these Old Testament scholars, they said that the book of Second Chronicles is the chroniclers, the people who records. When we say the chroniclers, is the people who record the book of Chronicles, and they are also the one who even wrote the book of Ezra and Nehemiah. But there are also some who said that it is probably Ezra, okay, the author of Chronicles. So we don't know for sure who wrote it, whether it's the chroniclers or whether it is this Ezra. But the bottom line is that when we talk about the authorship, it is not certain. Apart from the assumptions, we can say the assumptions is because the chronicler says that this connection you see in the last part of the book of Second Chronicles has a connection with Ezra, which is that Edict of Cyrus, which we'll look later on. What is that Edict of Cyrus? You will see that one, that their all assumptions that the chroniclers are the one who wrote it is because of they have that Edict of Ezra. The same way the people who said that the author is Ezra, they said no, it is because he has that first person written in the book of Ezra, and as well as in Chronicles. In the book of Chronicles, there is this thing called, the Cyrus of Edict. So we can say that the bottom line, the authorship is not certain, apart from the assumptions. Now, why I say assumptions also is because you have to keep in mind that the study, this study of the authorship in the Old Testament comes only with the 19th century modern world. So these modern worlds, they love to make assumptions, like the scientism things. They love to do things with assumptions. They try to build hypotheses so much, so that's what they try to apply to the Bible. But for us, we're not going to concern much about the authorship, who is it, who is not, because the book in itself has been there. It's been there, right? This book is already there. It has been written and we can read it. So we will more concern about what it is written there in this book and why it is written there in the this book it is written all about. Okay. So in order to do that, in order to understand why this book comes out and what it is written there, we need to study this thing called known as the structure, or the what we call as the outline. Okay, the structure or the outline. Now, what is this structure? What is this outline? This structure or this outline, it is just a skeleton graph. Okay, it is a skeleton graph on the chapters that we can find within the book of Second Chronicles. What are those? What are the main idea what we can find in those chapters of the books of Second Chronicles? Now, if you divide this structure, you will see that the Second Chronicles has two major sections. Okay, it has two greatest major section. That first section is that it is a history, as you know, that Chronicles is a records. It is a, we can say that it is a book that records in the first section known as for the Solomon's kingship. Okay, it is about the rule of Solomon that we can find from chapters 1 to 9. Okay, from chapter 1 to 9. And then we have also the second section. What is that second section? It is the records in the book of Second Chronicles. It is the records about the kingship of Solomon's successors, which means those kings who succeed Solomon. And this has to do mostly with the, not mostly, it has to do extensively with the Judah kingdom, or we can also say as the Southern Kingdom, which we will find from chapter 10 to chapter 36. So we will go by first section. When you look at the first section, as I said, it is about the Solomon kingship. Now, what is there in the Solomon kingship? We will find that within this Solomon kingship, there is various structure. Number one is the what we call as the Solomon's wisdom and prosperity, which we find in chapter 1. In chapter 1, when you read the Second Chronicle, you will find the wisdom and the prosperity of Solomon. Within that wisdom, Solomon's wisdom and prosperity, we have first, it starts with sacrifice and theophany. I'll explain what is that theophany, which we'll find in verses 1 to 13. If you look in verses 1 to 13, you'll see that the first part, it's about sacrifice. Now, how do we know that it is sacrifice? You will see that in verse 6. The verse 6 is a clear paradigm that can explain this sacrifice. It is that Solomon went up there to the bronze altar. He means he went to the tents of meeting, which is a tabernacle, and he went there to burn offerings. Okay, he went there with burnt offerings. Now, the reason that Solomon went there is because we know that he wants to give this offerings to Christ, offerings to God, for the fact that he may be able, we can say, he may be able to rule the kingdom. Okay, he may be able to rule the United Kingdom. Keep in mind that during the time of Solomon, it is a united kingdom. It is not a divided kingdom. It is a united kingdom. So that's what, when he was able to succeed his father's throne, David, he went there and sacrificed with the intent, probably we can say that he wants to rule the kingdom, to be able to rule the kingdom. And then we have the theophany. Okay, in that particular verse 1 to 13, we have a sacrifice. As I told you, that the probable reason is because he is getting ready himself. He is trying to give to the Lord the best of how he should rule the kingdom. And because of that, there is a theophany. What is this theophany? Theophany, it is actually a direct experience and a direct revelation of God with Solomon, which means Solomon experienced direct revelation and a direct experience with God. It seems like there is a talk to one person between Solomon and God. So that's what we call this term as theophany. It means direct experience and direct revelation that God reveals to Solomon, seems probably in a person, in a conversation as human to human. So that is a theophany. Now, what is happening in this theophany? You know that it is about what? It is about the very, we used to say a Sunday school story that it is here that Solomon asked God the wisdom to rule his people. The reason that he asked God wisdom is to be able to rule the kingdom. And when he got that wisdom from God, we have the second part. Okay, we have the second part in which it is he was able to rule the nation of the United Kingdom of Israel with power and wealth, with the power and wealth. Now, what is this power? Where do we find this power? We will see that this power and wealth The very clear paradigm is in verses 14 to 17. Now, the reason because of it is that when you read, especially from chapter 14, okay, chapter 14, you will see that Solomon was able to gather chariots and horses. Now, those chariots and horses represents power in the form of military. Okay, there is a military activities, and at the same time also we can see that there is wealth for him. Where do we see wealth? In this very verse of Second Chronicles, chapter 1, is that you will see in that idea of verse 17 where they imported from Egypt and then exported. So, which means there is what? There is an exchange of wealth, where you can see that he can export and import a chariot of 600 shekels of silver, see, which means so much wealth. Horses, he can import and export horses, and then also he can give so much importance to this exchange. Now, a nation who can do such things of exchange, import and export, we can say that it is a nation with wealth. So that is what the reason that that the reason why I put this structure, that in verse 14 and 15 you will see that there is power, there is wealth. It is interesting to see this one. See, it goes very much in line. Solomon was the person who sacrificed to God first for the fact that he may be able to rule the kingdom. And then with that sacrifice, God came to him. Okay, there is a theophany, and he asked, "What do you want?" And he asked the wisdom that he may be able to rule the kingdom. And how did he rule the kingdom? He ruled the kingdom with power and wealth, and then he gave importance to power in the form of military, and also with wealth in the form of what we call as commercial activities, which we'll find in chapter 1, verses 1 to 17. There is a shift now from here. Okay, there is a big shift now from here in the structures of the Second Chronicle, is that after Solomon becomes so much, a king with a kingdom of power and wealth, there is a shift to this, what we call the building of the temple. Okay, so chapter 2, verses 1 to 5. It is a long structure. We can really say that it is a long, very, very long structure, because it has about 2 chapters within it, 3 chapters within it. Chapter 2, verses 1 to chapter 5, verses 1. Now, if you look at this structure, the building of the temple, which we'll find in chapter 2, you will see that there is, number one, a kind of a structure where we call the preparation for the building of the temple, which we'll find in chapter 2, verses 1 to 17. Now, how does Solomon prepare the building of the temple, the preparation for the building of the temple? He prepared this preparation for the building of the temple again with this, what we call as the export and import idea, or what we call as the exchange ideology that we can find. You can see that Solomon prepared it with, he was asking for the 70,000 laborers and 80,000 stone cutters, so that they will come and see how to build up the temple for God. And then we don't see much of what's the reason that these stone cutters are there, these laborers are there, or probably it is for sure that they will be, we can call as the architect of the day. But what we can see more on this preparation for the building of the temple is that the idea of exchanging, okay, the idea of exchanging, where we can see in the form of an alliance with if you look at the Bible, you will see it is with the King Huram of Tyre, which means this King Huram of the Tyre, it is somewhere, if you look at Tyre, it is somewhere above, okay, above the southern kingdom, above it's somewhere in the northern part of the, uh, um, the geography of the Israel as a whole. Now, they are mostly the Phoenicians, we can call them as the Phoenicians, or we can call them as that. And then he went in alliance with this king. And when he went in alliance with this king, he started with a remembrance, saying that my father has, you have once dealt with my father David, and I'm sure that you're going to deal with me as well. So he was able to deal it, and you can see that the preparation for the building comes with so much of gold, so much of silver, so much of bronze, so much of iron, so much of purple crimsons, all of it. They are there in the preparation of the. That's what he was demanding in exchange. That give us the golds, give us the silver, so that we will be able to build the temple. And what is in return towards to the people of Tyre, it is mostly, you can see that it is the food, okay, the cause of barley, 20,000 of wine and 20,000 oils. So in exchange, you see, there is an exchange. I'll give you the oil, I'll give you the wine, I'll give you this barley, which is in the olden days. I remember when I read the book of P.P. Thomas. He's actually one of my favorite Indian Old Testament scholar, where he was telling that when you look at these products such as oil, such as wine, which you will find in this particular text itself of Second Chronicles, especially chapter 2, verses 10, you will find that these products are the rich products, okay, very, very expensive products. So he has to give, this barter system, in a barter system, in an economy where we exchange with the goods. So he asked the golds, he asked all the rich minerals, and he gave the rich resources also towards the king of Huram. So that is how the preparation for the temple starts. It starts with an alliance, it starts with an exchange, it starts with an economy of building, of giving, of import and export thing. So after that, we can also see that in the preparation of the temple, the third thing that we can see that Solomon is doing is that, which is very sad if I read this particular text, is because Solomon took a census. We see that he took a census. It's very important, this one. And he took the census of whom? The aliens. In the Old Testament, we call the alien as ger. That is the Hebrew word. And then by alien, it means those people who just come without proper citizenship. Okay, without proper citizenship within the the boundary uh, of the Israelite kingdom, or we can say the United Kingdom of Israel. So he took the census of them, and with the intention, what is the intention that you will find in chapter 17, okay, or in verse 17 of chapter 2, with the intention that he will make them laborers, with the intention that he will make them people who will work and who will look, who will build this temple for the Lord. Okay, so that is the kind of a structure that we find in this chapter 2, verses 1 to 17, which is very important. It is the exchange good, and at the same time, taking a census for the alien people with the intention that they will work for, the building of the temple. Now, the second of in the building of the temple, which is chapter 2 verses 1 to chapter 5 verses 1, you will find the building of the temple, which is in chapter 3 verses 1 to 9. Here you will find, when you look at this particular chapter verses 1 to 9, you will find that it is always about the elements. What are the elements? Okay, what are the ways that you should build the temple, how you should measure the temple. So you will find all of those that are the temples of building the temples in the form of a cubit, and measurement about the cubit, and also of what are the important elements that should be put there. But you will see here that this temple, one of the things that I want you to understand about this temple is that this temple is a temple which is filled with golds, okay, because you will find in chapter 3, verses 7 or 5, 6, 7, you will feel that it is covered with fine gold and make with palms and make with change, and all the precious stones, the cherubims, the door, and all of it is full of what? These precious things, minerals that have been imported from the King of Huram, or King Huram of Tyre. So it is a temple where it is filled with expensive products, should we say, or expensive minerals, and it is giving importance so much to that what we call as an elite world. Why I'm saying it is an elite world, it's not a wrong thing to say that one, but something which is mostly for the rich. Okay, so that is what this particular building of the temple, which you will find it is a kind of a structure where it will tell that inside the temple there is very much rich and products such as gold, such as the purple and the crimson fabrics, which is the symbol of prosperity, despite of the the measurements there within this temple. Now, another thing that we will look further, if we look further, it's the furnishing of the temple. Now, when you look at these furnishing of the temple also, you will find that, which is in chapter 3, verses 10 to 5 to 1, you will find what is important here is that, yeah, the elements with inside the temple. Okay, what are the elements which is to be part inside of the temple? You will find that there is this what we call as the golden lampstand. Okay, which provide, when we say this golden lampstand, it is in the Old Testament idea mostly. If you look from this the study of these rites and rituals, you will see that they are a kind of a path. A lampstand is a kind of a way, a light that you will, as you walk into the altar. You will also find this basin. Okay, basin. The fact that there is a basin in the somewhere in the temple. Okay, in the temple, it is because of this sacrifice. If the priest finish his sacrifice, which the people will offer to him, he will go and wash his hands and all them. And then what is more important, it is the altar. The altar is the place of sacrifice. So in that place of altar as a place of sacrifice, you know that it is a place where the people will come there with different kinds of sacrifices. Maybe it is a confessions of their sin, which is mostly associated with the burnt offerings, and then there can be also the thanksgiving offerings, and there will also will be like what we give, just to give us a presence towards the priest. But apart from that, there is what we call here is that the holies of the holies. Okay, there is a place called the holies of the holies within this furnishing the temple structure. In this place, the holies of the holies, which is it says that it is the place where the cherubim are there, which they cover the eyes. This is the place where they kept the ark of the covenant. Okay, there is a place where they kept the ark of the covenant. And as you know that when we talk about the ark of covenant, if you don't know, so maybe you should know this one. It is believed to have had inside the ark of the covenant. It is those the two tablets, we can say, just the two tablets of Moses that he that he acquired from God when he was there in the Horeb, which we can find that one. Horeb or Sinai is the same name. Okay, uh, mostly in the Old Testament idea or the Old Testament study, when we say Horeb, we used to say that it was used by these certain writers in the Old Testament known as the Yahwistic, and Sinai it's mostly used by these Elohistic. But that is not a problem. You should know that when we say Horeb or the Mount Sinai, it is the same, and that you can see there in chapter 5 verses 10. Okay, verses 10 especially, you will see that one. As I said, that these are the furnishing of the temple where the holies of the holies are very important. So you will find that after this, you will find the dedication of the temple. Okay, you will find about the dedication of the temple. What is there in this dedication? What are the chapters there in the about the dedication of the temple? It is from chapter 5 verses 2 to chapter 7 verse 10. Okay, it is from chapter 5 to verse 7 to chapter 7 verse 10. Here it is, you will see that it is the installation of the ark. Okay, the installation of the ark, which we will see from that the ark was brought into the temple. It was brought into this place called as the holies and the holies, and it will install there. As I told you, that the installation of the ark is very important because it is a mark of covenant. It's a mark of covenant that the Lord made with the people of Israel there in the Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb, which we can find in verse 10 of chapter 5. So it is that one. Then we see that when they installed this ark, the priest was in the place of the holies and holies, and there they were singing, they were making harps and cymbal, and they were declaring about that this is the house of the Lord. Okay, in this installation of the ark, the priest was the one who will play, who will pray But at the same time, mostly it is about the praise and thanksgiving that the temple has been made, and they will declare it as the house of the Lord. And they declare in this way, for he is good, the Lord is good, his steadfast love endures forever, which is a very, we use it very much in the Psalms of praise. Okay, when I don't know how many of you actually belongs to the this what we call as a liturgical churches, but when you look at these liturgical churches, you will see that when they read the call for invocation, okay, mostly the call to worship, which is the starting point. I belong to that kind of a church. You will see that they will always use this psalm of praise, okay, where they will say that uh, the Lord is good. He has given us this temple because the Lord is good and his steadfast love endures forever, which means it is a praising to God. It is a kind of uh, a kind of a statement where we can say that give importance that to the house of the Lord, that the temple is the house of the Lord. Now, in the dedication of the temple, if we move further, we will find that in chapter 6, verses 1 to 11, there is the Solomon's address. Solomon address towards the temple. It's a kind of, like when you think about a meeting, everything is always there. It is an address is always there, is given when there is any dedication to any particular thing. So within this dedication of the temple also, there is this what we call the Solomon's address. What is important in this address, which we can find in chapter 6, verses 1 to 11? You will see that if you read it, it is about the promise and the fulfillment. Solomon addressed that you have promised, okay, that you will be given a temple, a place to my father David. But he will not, as you know, that the story was not there. David was not able to fulfill in building the temple, but he was given in, but the temple was fulfilled in Solomon's time. That's what, if you look at this address, you will see that he is addressing about this content of promise, that the Lord never failed in his promise, and he gave them and he fulfilled his promise with Solomon. And that's what it is. This address, we call it as a promise and fulfillment address, or we can call it as what we call as a covenant address, a fulfilled covenant address that the Lord has made with David. So that is the Solomon's address when you find in chapter 1, 6, verses 1 to 11. Then we have the Solomon prayer. Very interesting, the Solomon prayer, because I think this is actually the clear definition of what a temple and what a church is all about. When you look at this Solomon's prayer. Now, if you look at this Solomon's prayer, what is very interesting in it, if you see it, it has a long verse from chapter 6, 12 to 42, such a long verses it contains here. You will see that he addressed in this way. He talks about the promise and the fulfillment, but in chapter 18, okay, he said, will God reside with the mortals on earth? Even heavens and the highest heaven cannot contain you. I should say he's a little bit clever. He doesn't know whether God will reside in the temple or not. Okay, there's no even an answer that God. We'll see later how God responds to his prayer, but he's very clever in saying that whether God will reside in this temple or not, I don't know. He just questioned. We call it as a rhetorical questions where there is no answer. It left to us to answer. It left to us who interpret to say that yes, if the temple is really the place where God will reside. But if that's the case, also there is a question whether, what is the forever presence of God everywhere if the temple is only the place which it resides. But very interesting about Solomon's prayer, even if you have put that rhetorical questions where he didn't, I mean, like Solomon doesn't answer at all whether this temple is a place that God reside. He shifts his prayer. He said, let this be a house of what? A house where all people will come. If you look all that verses, okay, it is a place of confession and a place of thanksgiving. When we talk about sacrifice, one thing that we know about sacrifice or the prayer in today's world, it is a prayer, okay? It is a prayer where you should know that when we talk about the prayer, it is a kind of an idea where there is a need of confession, there is a need of thanksgiving, and that is a sacrifice. So he said, let this be a place of sacrifice. So that is why he shifted the temple as a place of sacrifice. We will look later on what does it mean by this place of sacrifice or the place of prayer when it comes to the theological themes about it. So as we go further, we see that God's glory descending, okay, that there is a descending of God's glory after Solomon's prayer, which we will see in the form of a cloud, which we can see in the form of a fires, in the form of a cloud. Okay, mostly it is in the form of a fire that we can see here. And when you look at the fire, uh, the symbol of a fire, it is a symbol that when, in a burnt offerings, I used to look at these Jewish way of sacrifice. If you burn the meat that the people are given and it burn it right at once, it means God has accepted that prayer. God has given the presence of God is there. Mostly when we talk about the fire, it is actually the acceptance and the presence of God is there. So that is what God's glory descending after the Solomon's prayer in the form of the fire, which we will find in chapter 7, verses 1 to 3. Then it is obvious that when God accepted and God's presence is always be there. It starts with a symbol, okay? It starts with a symbol of fire. It is very obvious that there will be a celebration that is, like happen to everyone, right? When there is, dedication, there will always be what we call as, in this time we can say as a feasting, a celebration, as a feasting. And here, the festival was not so sure whether it's what kind of a festival. Many call it as a festival of Sukkot, which means a festival of dedication at the temple, which the book of, I think, Esther, the book of Esther is very much part of it. When you read during this time of celebration, which is the festival of tabernacle, okay, the festival of tabernacle, which when you look at the idea of this festival, it's about the presence of God. We will celebrate because God's presence is with us. So that is a remembrance about what God has done to us and what God has given to his presence is ever fulfilling. So that is the celebration that we have here, but there's no much clear indication in the text if you look at that particular chapter 7, 4 to 10, whether what kind of a celebration, but many scholars call it as a celebration of Sukkot, okay, which means a celebration of festival of tabernacle. And when we talk about tabernacle, it is the whole symbol is the presence of God. And it is there that they celebrated and they feel that this dedication of the temple, during the time of dedication of the temple, it is the place where God's presence will ever be felt. After that, we have the second theophany. Okay, the second theophany is there. Now, what does it mean? As I told you, theophany, it's about the direct experience between Solomon and God here. In the second Chronicles, it's about direct experience of Solomon and God. What is this second theophany? It is the theophany where God responds to the prayer of Solomon. Okay, it is the response here of God to the prayer of Solomon. What did God respond in this particular text? It's very interesting, especially if you read from verse 13, okay, of chapter 7. He said, from verse 14, he said that I will accept, from verse 12, he said, I will accept this temple as a place, as a house of sacrifice in verse 12. Okay, he said that one. I will accept this temple as a prayer, and I have chosen this place for myself as a place, as a house of sacrifice. And I told you what does it mean by sacrifice? It's a place of prayer. Okay, it is a place where you will go as people in the form of a prayer. And as I told you, we will look at idea of prayer and sacrifice later on when we place where you will pray, you will seek, and turns all your wicked ways. Temple is a place for that. You pray, you seek God, and turn from their wicked ways. Turn all from your wicked ways, and He will hear. He will hear. God will hear us from heaven, and will forgive our sins. Which means God is still, when we talk, God might be somewhere in heaven, and it is. We might say, if we want to talk about heaven, maybe in the other time. where is this heaven, or is this heaven a place or somewhere else? But in other times we can talk about it. But we can say that this temple, it is a place where we people will go and start doing sacrifices by talk to God in a form of a prayer, because He listens. This is a very important aspect of God. I love to talk about these aspects of God, especially as the God who listens, as the God who hears, because everywhere in the Old Testament you will see that when people turn themselves to God, He always listens. When they are in pain, they are whatever they are. If you look at Job also, or you look at the Exodus, maybe the book of Exodus is one of the best. We see that there are people who are in pain in the Israel in Egypt, and it is the salvation comes, or the liberation comes there. It is just because God listened to their prayer. In Exodus 3, He said, I have heard the cry of my people. Heard in itself, it's what? It is that He has the ears to listen. And because He has the ears to listen, God has, has the power to listen, and has the power to redeem us just by listening. Just by listening. That is the very important place, important part that we should keep note about the theology when we look about God from this particular text. So God responds to the prayer of Solomon, that he said, I accept this place as a place of sacrifice only. When we talk about sacrifice, it is a place of prayer. Then we have the next structure after chapter 7, verses 11 to 22. It is before we go there to the Solomon success, remember that there is a response. God says, I accept that it is a house of prayer, but also in verse 19, I don't want to go further. I mean, like, do away with this, but it is very important when we talk about this one. He said, in verse 17, he said, but he said again, God said, but if you turn aside and forsake my statute and my commandments in this house of prayer, in this temple, I will abandon you. Okay, because you abandon me, I will also abandon you. So, which means what? I accept this place as a place of house and prayer, where you will come and pray and become humble to yourself. But if you abandon, okay, if you do away from my principle, from my what we call as from my commandment and statute, God even says that there will be a cause and effect. Okay, this is very important. Okay, this particular verse is very important, because God says, if you do so, I will abandon you. You will have what we call as a retribution, or what we call as a cause and effect. If you cause me pain, I will also the result of it will be pain. So this is very important, this particular chapter 7, 11 to 22, because it is a response of God. So if we go further from there, you will see, okay, the relation between these cause and effect, especially with the kingship of Solomon's successors. Okay, if we go further from there, from Solomon's success, or from the response, second theophany, we'll see the Solomon's success, which we will find in chapter 8 and 9, where you will see that there is a success in political. Okay, the success in political is because he was able to rule. Okay, he was able to rule with power, and then that's what the important thing is, that even the Queen of Sheba also came to him and tried to test his wisdom. But at the end of the day, she said, you are too good. Okay, you are too good as a king. And that's what you can also see there is a religious, okay, there is a religious success, which means the festival. You will see here there is a festival in terms of religion. It is very much a festival, which there is a festival of Sabbath. And when you know about the festival of Sabbath, it has also there is also the festival of unleavened bread, the festival of weeks, and the festival of booths. You will see all the festivals during the time of Solomon. Okay, these festivals, it has always, like Sabbath, it is always a remembrance about God's rest. He gave rest to the people, free the slave. And if you look at the festival of unleavened bread, it is of Passover, the festival of Passover. What is that festival of Passover? It is a festival of remembrance that God saved them from the people of Egypt. And this festival is very, very, very important, okay, for mostly of the Jewish people. I remember one of my friend, if I have to tell you a story here, if one of my friend, uh, he studied there somewhere in Jerusalem. I'm not so sure about the university, but when he come back, he said this festival was a festival of bitter. And I said, what do you mean? Because this unleavened bread, it's very bitter. And he said, why, what is the symbol of that bitterness? It's because he said that it is a remembrance of pain, but God saved them from that pain. So they have these festivals all, okay? And then when it comes to economy, okay, economic or the economy success, you see that it from chapter 8, 17, 9 to 28, you will find that it is a festival of what? It is a, I mean, like it is a success of what? It is a success of exchange again. See, visit of the Queen Sheba, she was testing him, and at the end of the day, she found that he is really a wise king. And because of that, of his wisdom, then she exchanged all her goods and she gave a gift, you can say, as a gift to him, whether it's from the spices or from the precious stones or the words. What There are so many grants that she gave to Solomon because of his wisdom. And then, like for political, also he has the administration, the good administration so far ever in the history of Solomon's kingdom, and it is known as also as the Golden Age. In the history of the Old Testament, we call them as the history of Golden Age, to the fact that there is a lot of success in Solomon's, in Solomon's rule and Solomon's reign. And from there, we see it's Solomon's death, which is just from chapter 9. From chapter 9, you can see it is verse 29 to 31. It talks only about Solomon's death, where he was also he reigned, as you all know, that he reigned the United Kingdom of Israel for 40 years, and he was buried in the city of his father David. And from there, we see that after his death, there comes these people known as the kingship of Solomon's successor, starting with Rehoboam. So before I go further, do you have any question to ask? Maybe if you have anything, at least let me know if you do have, because I'm not so sure whether I can see you. I'm using it from the iPad, so I'm not seeing you at all. If you have, at least you can just give sign, or I don't know what to do. Maybe just type in the chat box so that I can see if you have any questions before I go further. Let's make it a little bit interactive so that it will be good.
Dear students, if you have any questions, kindly unmute and you can ask Brother Timothy questions, or you can leave in your chat box. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Jasmine.
Oh, you're welcome.
Okay, I'll go further then. I think they all understood, because we are dealing with the Bible itself. Now we're dealing with what is happening as it is written there in the Bible. So the second section now, the kingship of Solomon's successor. As you all know that we have two major sections. The first is the Solomon's kingship or the Solomon's reign. And now we have the kingship of Solomon's successors, of how these successors reign the Judah kingdom. Now, if you look at these Solomon's successor, it starts first with Rehoboam, which is the son of Solomon itself, and he reigned from 931 to 913 BCE. And the chapter that we will see about his reign is from 2 Chronicles chapter 10, verses 1 to 23. What happened during the time of his reign? As you all know that it was during the time of his reign that there is this called as a division. Okay, it is starting from here. The division of monarchy in the history of Israel starts from here. Now, what was the reason that led to the divisions of monarchy here? You will see that in chapter 4, verse 10. How did the people say? Okay, how did the people say to Rehoboam? He said that your father make our yoke heavy. What does it mean when he say yoke heavy? It means there is a forced labor. If we interpret it from the point of a history, there is taxes, there is so much hard service, okay, there is all this thing, and we have to serve you. And the people says, make it less for us. But what is happening? instead of listening, Rehoboam, instead of listening to the elders, he never listened to him, but he was listening to other people. Okay, he was listening to one of his friends, if you really see from that particular text. And that's what there caused a division. Who led to the cause of division? It is these people under Jeroboam. Okay, Jeroboam is the one who started this, whom we can say as the leader, who led to this, revolt against this idea and the political rule of Solomon, which is now under his son Rehoboam. So because of that, there is a fight, there is a revolt. So if people ask you when did this division started, remember that it started after the death of Solomon with his son Rehoboam, because there are these people also who came, the common people under Jeroboam as a leader. They start fighting it. They start saying that, please do so. If not, then we will revolt. So that's what there was a revolt. If you can see the revolt, it is fine in verse 17 of chapter 10 following. Okay, there is that kind of a revolt where even Rehoboam has to fled away. He has to fled away from Jerusalem. He has to fled away from that particular place where he went, known as the Shechem. Okay, so that is the thing that this Rehoboam started. Now Rehoboam also was, if you look further in this particular text, you will see that Rehoboam also, there is a misplace here. I'm sorry. I think during my student he was doing his, asking him to do the PPT, he might have misplaced somewhere a little bit here. That is the connection of chapter 10 and chapter 13. When you look at that chapter 10 to chapter 13, there is chapter 12, 11, and 12. And then when you look at it, there is that Rehoboam was supported. Okay, in that particular chapters, you will see that Rehoboam was supported by the priests and the Levites. Okay, they were supported by the priests and Levites. And I'm not so sure, when I read this particular text, I'm not so sure why did they have to support it. The priests need to support the priest and the Levite needs to support Rehoboam. But there is this idea, okay, there is this idea where if you look from First Kings, okay, from the chapters of the Kings, you will find that Jeroboam, he reject the priests, he reject the Levites, and he start making his own, making his own priests, making his own people, okay, who will look after this religious department, we can call. That is the thing, that these priests and Levites supported Rehoboam. But what is happening to Rehoboam? What is happening to Rehoboam after the priests and the Levites supported is that there is a marriage. Okay, there is a marriage of Rehoboam. And then apart from the marriage, we will see that there is also what we call as the attack from Egypt. Now, the attack from Egypt, it is because Jeroboam also was a little bit, he was a little bit powerful. Okay, as a kingdom during his time, he's a little bit powerful. He's a little bit what we call as, wealthy. Egypt was a kind of if I have to explain you from the history, from the secular history a bit here, give me just one, idea that I'll explain. During that time, Egypt was a little bit like always want to poke on some other's life, especially when it comes to when they came to know that that nation has more wealth, that nation has more power. They always want to poke. So that's what this was the time that they want to attack Judah. But unfortunately, they don't win because you can see that who is the person who helps Rehoboam is the prophet. Okay, it's the prophet Shemaiah. Okay, it's the prophet Shemaiah who came to you and says that return to the Lord. If you want to win this battle, you have to humble yourself. You have to humble yourself to the Lord, and the Lord will give you a complete win over this Egypt. And then if you go further from there, you will see that there is a death of Rehoboam. And Rehoboam was 40 years old when he was dead. He reigned Jerusalem for 17 years, which is also a long years. And he also was put along with his successors, with his ancestors, David and others, was buried along in the city. But after Rehoboam, then came Abijah. Abijah was the one who ruled to the kingdom of Judah. Now, Abijah was also engaged in battles because he's very strong. We don't know much about Abijah, but we can say that he is a person who in terms of, from the second Chronicle, who is very much in terms of power, okay, who is very much having the power, because he is very much engaging in these battles, and he always won the battle. Okay, he always also won the battle, and he was giving so much importance with power. Not much of wealth is written about him, but we can see that he was always fighting with Jeroboam also. But anyhow, Abijah was always he has that, because he had the power, he was able to recover himself and grew strong. Okay, and grew strong when he is in the fighting against Jeroboam or fighting against any other nation. And that's what Abijah was known as in terms of the kingships of Solomon's successor. He was very much known as the king with wars, okay, the king with powers and the king with wars. After him, we have this what we call as Asa, which he rules from the year 1911. We're not sure so much. Some said it's even from 910 to 870 BCE, which we'll find in chapters 14:1 to chapter 16, verses 14. Now, during that time, he was a successor of Abijah. This is also a very important king, because you know that Asa was known as a king who did right in front of the Lord. Okay, who did good and right in the sight of the Lord. Why? Okay, because if you look at this part, is his reign, he took away all the altars, the foreign altars. He took all the high places. He broke down the pillars of all those that have a foreign influence. Okay, he took all of that. So that's what he was known as eyes inside of the good and right in the sight of the Lord. And he was also the person who built cities, which means because he was doing right in front of the Lord, and he was giving this succession, that he was able to build cities, he was able to to protect the whole kingdom from all the people outside. But there is one thing that is a problem to Asa, okay? That is because he was doing right in the sight of the Lord, because he was able to do, to build the cities, to protect the kingdom. Again, God tested them. They tested them with whom? With these Ethiopians. There is an invasion from the Ethiopians. And what is interesting is that this Asa, he cried to the Lord. Okay, he really cried to the Lord, and when he cried to the Lord, you see that he was able to, humble himself. We can say that he cannot, maybe he was thinking of himself that he cannot defeat these Utopians, but later on we can see that he cried to the Lord, and with the help of Azariah, okay, the prophet Azariah, who is the son of Obed, you can see that Asa was able to defeat these people or the Ethiopians, and he was able to put everyone to death. And from there he was able to gain many wealth also. Okay, he was able to gain many wealth, and he gave praises even to the Lord, as you see in chapter 14, in chapter 15 verse 14, that he gave praises and shouting to the Lord because the Lord is good to him. Okay, he is a very, what we call as one of the kings that is known as very right and very good in the history of Judah, as we all know that we are doing with the history of Judah. But there is a problem with Asa. After he was doing that, he went into an alliance again with a treaty exchange with Aram, and he was condemned. Okay, the king Aram, and he was condemned. You must have a question by now. What is the problem with this alliance? What is this problem with this alliance? What is this problem of exchange? What is this problem of treaty? You will see later when we do the theological theme. He was condemned, okay? And what is interesting about this Asa is that he was known as good and right at the beginning, but later on he was known as what? As a bad king. He was known as a bad king later on, because the fact is that you will see, especially from chapter 11, or from chapter 16, verse 11, where you will see that he was his, his cause and effect. Okay, the cause and effect for him is that the effect for him is that he get a disease. Okay, he get a disease from the Lord. This is a very interesting thing when you play with the Lord. Remember when I said that that Solomon's, especially with this, what we call as the response in chapter 7, God responds. It's very interesting. God says, I will accept this place, right, as a house of sacrifice. But there is a word but there in verse 19. If you play around with me, there will always be an effect. See, now we see with Asa. He started as a good king. But see now, when he entered into an alliance and he was thinking himself as great, and that's what he got a disease. There was still a chance for him, in fact, to enter into the Lord's presence, but he was not at all interested in it. He was seeking the help of a physician, this says here. Instead of seeking the Lord, he was seeking the help of a physician, and that's what he died out of a disease. So this is very interesting. In a world that we live, there will always be this Newtonian effect, we will call, if I have to put it that way. There's cause and effect. Even with God, there is this thing called cause and effect. So we should be very careful if we want to, play with this God, because this God of the Old Testament is a God of cause and effect, who give, if you play around with him, there will always be an effect upon our lives. So after him came Jehoshaphat, or you can call him, we know he is also known as, Jehoshaphat, make a mistake there. And he rules Judah from 872 to 848 BCE, which we'll find again in chapters 17 to 20. He is very faithful and blessed king. He is a very faithful and a blessed king because he upholds the laws of the kings. Okay, he upholds the laws of the Lord, or the principles of the Lord. He is very rich, also great riches and honor. And what is very, very interesting about this king? He started what we call as a school of theology. Okay, I can say, I mean, if I have to interpret, we start the school of theology. How do we know that he started the school of theology? If you look at chapter 17, verse 7 following, they taught in Judah. They taught what? They taught the book of the law. Okay, which means they taught this book of the law, which is, what is that book of the law? Most of us, we believe here as the Old Testament that it is the book of what Moses have got during the time in Sinai. Okay, the principle of God, those Exodus 20, 19 and 20. So those are the book of the law. They start teaching that time. So we call it as a school of theology or a school of culture, whatever do we call it. But it is him who start that process. That's what he is, a faithful and blessed a person. Okay, he's a faithful and a blessed king. Then what is interesting about, apart from being faithful and blessed, is that he also involved with Ahab. As you all know, who is Ahab? He's the king of Israel. Okay, he's the king of Israel. He also have an involvement with Ahab. The reason that he has an involvement with the king of Ahab is because the king of Ahab came to him and like he wants this alliance again. This proposal comes from Ahab. Okay, the proposal comes from Ahab. He wants this alliance. And how do you know this alliance? Now you see that the alliance is mostly in the form of a marriage. That is in chapter 18, verse 1. He made a marriage alliance with Ahab. Okay, and then the reason that he wants to make an alliance is probably, I think, this Jehoshaphat has this intention with him to unite again the kingdom. Okay, to unite again the kingdom. But It is very sad when you look at it, because during the time of his involvement with Ahab, this Ahab has a very crooked mind. Okay, he has a very crooked mind, and he wants to fight into a battle. And he called even King Jehoshaphat, and he went. And how did he went? He said, "This Ahab says, why don't you wear my robe and I'll wear your robe? Okay, why don't you wear my robe and I wear your robe?" And then he was about to die. This King Jehoshaphat was about to die, but what is interesting is that when these people saw, the enemies saw that it is not King Jehoshaphat, it is not King Ahab, they released Jehoshaphat. Okay, they released Jehoshaphat, but Ahab died in that battle. Okay, he died in the battle where they went together. And this was actually supported by Micaiah the prophet for Jehoshaphat. Okay, Jehoshaphat was supported by him. Actually, he didn't listen at all to Micaiah. He went to the battle, but luckily that God still saved him. Okay, God still saved Jehoshaphat. And after that, Jehoshaphat, there's a reformation in Jehoshaphat. That reformation is that when he returned back home to Judah, that reformation is a judicial reformation. Now, how do we know that there is a judicial reformation? Is that he appointed judges. Who are the judges? The judges are the one who are actually will sit and listen to the problems. Remember that happens where in Jethro's time, I mean, like in Egypt, where Jethro was the one who gave the idea to Moses. He said, you cannot do alone, right? You cannot do alone. So you have to choose people who are what? Trustworthy, people who are not corrupt. See, the judicial reform of God. People who are very trustworthy, who are not corrupt, who are not biased. Okay, it is very related. Who are trustworthy, who are not corrupt, who are not biased. Now, the reason I used to tell my student when we talk about this from Exodus is that it might be tempted to every people. Excuse me once. It might be tempted for every judges, because if there is a problem, right? If there is a problem between two parties, these one party might have influence with wealth. And if you are, like if you are too much towards wealth, you might become biased towards the other person, and then you become corrupted, and you are not trustworthy person. So this God's judicial of God is very interested. It is the people who will involve in judicial reform is the people who are trustworthy, who are not corrupted, who are not biased. So he was the one who involved in this judicial reform for the fact of what? For the fact that people will be seek justice, right? When we talk about judiciary, it means what? It is about justice and righteousness. You think about the courtroom there, you will talk about the justice and righteousness. So the next one we see, it's a battle and his death. There was an invasion from the east, as you all know. Mostly it is a battle from the Moabite and the Ammonites. If you look at the map, I hope if you have seen the map, these people from the east are the Moabites and the Ammonites. There was an invasion upon the Jehoshaphat kingdom, but Jehoshaphat prayed to God. He humbled himself to God, see, and when he humbled himself to God, there is a victory towards him, and that victory was seen that in a form that he was giving a lot of wealth again. God will bless you if you humble yourself before the Lord. It will surely come, okay? It will surely come, and it will may come in different form, whether it's well or hell, doesn't matter. But God will surely bless you if you really humble yourself and pray, and victory will be upon you. And then the end of Joshua's reign, you can see it is his death. He died as a good king, and then the successor for him is Jehoram. Okay, Jehoram. Now Jehoram, it's not that big for him. It's not that the story for him is not much, but he's also a person who always revolt power, who always wants power, and he revolts against Edom. Okay, he revolts against Edom, and then what is interesting about this particular king Jehoram is that he revolts against Edom. Now, who When we talk about Edom, which is the Edomites, it is actually what? It is actually a revolt against brothers, because Israel or Judah have a relation with Edom, because the Edom comes from Esau. Okay, there is a belief that Edom comes from the tribes of Esau. So there is a revolt against brother. And that's what Elijah letter comes in. He said, don't fight against it. Yeah, thank you. There is a Esau thing there in the chat box. So that's what it comes from Elijah. So which means Elijah is a prophet during the time of Jehoram. It's not only during the time of Jehoram, but even many kings. So he was told by the Elijah that don't ever go against your own brothers. Okay, that is the idea that we will see there, and make Judah go astray if you revolt against your own brothers. So this is the thing that I want you to tell you, because if we are too violent, I think, okay, if we are too violent in our life, God will not rest upon us or so, because there will always be an effect. And I remember that when we were studying in our master degree, we came across from my professor saying that if you look at the Old Testament, okay, if you look at Old Testament, that if you are too violent so much, then you will lose your memory. What does it mean by memory? Is that people will not remember you. And it is very obvious in today's world also, that if you're too violent too much, who will like to remember that person? Who will like to remember that king? So it should be, like, we should not be too violent, and we should be always turn to the Lord and wait upon the Lord, that he will struck for our sake and for our good. But you see that even Jehoram was not listening to Elijah, and he went and fight, and the end for him is again disease. He has a stomach disease. If you read properly from chapter 21 to 18, he has a stomach disease. Bowel. The bowel is a stomach disease, and we don't know what is that disease. And he died in great agony, which means he died in great pain. So listen to the people, listen to the prophets, listen well. Don't think ourselves as we are the best, because God walks through people, walks through many ways. So I think this is the story that Jehoram's give us, lessons that he gave us. Then after that we have Ahaziah. Ahaziah, as you all know, he sees the throne. He reigns with in a good way. Also, he did what was evil actually also in the sight of the Lord. And the reason that he did is evil in the sight of the Lord is because he was also bringing these foreign worships. Okay, he bring most of the foreign worship, and then he died. Very short. This Ahaziah also very short reign. It's only 1 century he reigned, and he died. 1 year he reigned and he died. And then come Athaliah. Who is this Athaliah? It is the queen. It is not a king. It is a queen. Athaliah was actually one. He is the wife. She's the wife. He's the mother of Ahaziah. Okay, and the mother of Ahaziah, and she is not from the tribe of Israel. Never from the tribe of Israel. This Ahaziah, Athaliah, and she has this violent nature within her. She wants to kill every possible kings of Israel. She wants to kill every possible kings of Israel. And luckily, during her time, Joash, okay, this next king, was able to save. He was able to save by whom? By this priest known as Jehoiada. Okay, the priest Jehoiada saved Joash. Okay, he saved Joash, and this Athaliah was having that mind to end the whole history of Judah, to end the whole history of this Solomon reign or David's successor. But she was not able to do that. Thanks to this priest Jehoiada, who saved whom? Who saved Joash. Okay, who saved Joash. And you will see that in that particular chapter itself, chapter 22, you will see that in verse 8 that Joash was crowned as a king, and she was shocked when they were crowning the king, him crowned as a king. And she went and to the temple. She went to the temple, and then she cried herself. She tore her, but she was killed. She was murdered. She was also murdered by this Jehoiada priest. I mean, like under his direction that she was murdered. But he was the successor of this, what we call as the uh, Solomon's reign, was saved. Okay, was saved by Jehoiada, and Joash came in. And what does Joash came in? When he came in, what does he do? Is that he repaired the temple. He repaired the temple. The reason that there are many problem, okay, there are many problem with the temple is during the time of Jehoram. During the time of Jehoram, one thing that he did also is that there is this cultural influence. He went with other treaties and alliance. Okay, there is a treaty and alliance, and when there is that treaty and alliance, there is this thing called as, they try to bring in many different form of worship from other people. Okay, from other people. So that's what Joash repaired the temple. Okay, he repaired the temple. He gave importance to this Jerusalem temple, and he asked the help of the people with the tax so that he will be able to repair the temple. But there is also an apostasy for him. After Jehoiada, he was under Jehoiada the priest. Joash was under Jehoiada the priest, but after Jehoiada died, he was what? The problem with him is that he grew old, and he was actually, he turned evil. Okay, the fact that he turned evil is because he also start to bring idols back to the temple. This Joash also start bring idols inside the temple. He start have this alliance with different people, and then he brings idols, and that's what it becomes a problem to the history again. How did it becomes a problem to the history again? If you look at it, he was stood against by Zechariah. The prophet Zechariah was prophesying during the time of this Joash. He said that you have made a mistake. You have brought again the idols, and then but there is no history of just Zechariah here, except the book which you will learn later. But the outcome, the effect of this Joash, again, he was killed by a sword by those people. You see that, but they conspire against him, and by command of the king, they stone him to death. Okay, they kill. King Joash did not remember the kindness and Jehoiada, Zechariah father, and that's what the end of this Joash also is, that he was also killed, and he was not even. Okay, interestingly, is that he was not even, his body was not even placed with other successors, with others good successors. So that's what this Joash also, he was. It's very important about his history because he's known of his apostasy. Then after Joash, we have Amaziah. Okay, this Amaziah, it's you will see that he is also another king who loved to slaughter his own brothers, Edomites. Okay, who loved to make war against his own brothers, and then because of that, he was defeated. It was during him that he was defeated. But it was very interesting that this Israel won against Judah, but they took only a few things from Judah. They went back to Israel himself. They seized only the treasuries of the king's house. So the problem with this Amaziah is that he is also trying to fight his own brothers, and the end of it, so he died. He died of what? He died of being killed. Okay, he is being killed in Lachish, which means he died out of what we call the sword. Then come this Uzziah. Okay, this person himself also is actually a good person at start, but later on he becomes what? His pride is so much, then he starts against the apostasy, which means when we talk about the apostasy in the Second Chronicles, it's always about bringing idols to the temple, bringing other things, other way of worshiping into this what we call as the temple of God. Then he also died. Then came this. I'll move ahead further because we have one more book. Okay, we have one more book. And we have the reign of Jotham. Okay, this Jotham also, he reigned only after a few times. He fought the kings of the Ammonites. He was also a man of power. He was also the book of, he's not known much. Then come this Ahaz. Ahaz in himself also he is not known much. But what is interesting about this King Ahaz is that he also was, uh, he was defeated. Okay, he was defeated by both by this King Aram and by this King Israel. And that's what he was also apostasy. He went to apostasy. You see, this is the history of apostasy now. It's because of the alliance, okay, of the alliance with other people, and mostly it is with the gods of Damascus. For Ahaz, it's mostly with the gods of Damascus. He was bringing all the kinds of worship from Damascus. So he also, because of that apostasy, he died. And then we have the reign of Hezekiah, which is very important reign. It is from chapter 29 to 32, where the first thing that he do is that he cleaned the temple. Why did he clean the temple? Is because all of those above, prior to him, these prior kings, which is, they are the kings where they will love to bring this idol. So that's what he has to clean the temple. He rededicate the temple. The second thing is that when they do that thing, they have the Passover. Okay, why did they? I told you that they have the Passover. It is because Passover, it is a kind of a festival that remembrance God saved them from the land of Egypt, which is very painful experience. Okay, but at the same time, it is also an experience of revelation. Then he reorganized the worship, as you know. And when we talk about the reorganize of worship, is that he reorganized these people. Okay, he reorganized these people, the priests and the Levites. Okay, he destroyed all the pagans, or he destroyed all of it and reorganized the priests and the Levite. Then came the invasion of Sennacherib. Who is this Sennacherib? Listen to me carefully. Sennacherib is actually the Assyrian king. Okay, is actually the Assyrian king, who is the king of, who came over to Judah with the intention that they will come into terms, alliance again. Okay, they will come into term and alliance again, in treaty again. But it was rejected by Hezekiah, and he was thinking that he will win into the war, but Sennacherib died. Okay, he was defeated and dead, and Hezekiah was praised for his humility and greatness. Okay, where he was, because he took the ways of the Lord. We can say he took the ways of the Lord, and that's what he is. His humility and greatness was recorded here in the book of Second Chronicles, because of the fact that he doesn't want to enter into any kind of treaty with this Assyrian king. Then come another king, is the King Manasseh. King Manasseh is the king who actually, who was actually a king who was about to become to apostasy, but later on he repented. Okay, he's like that. He was about to enter into building places and trying to bringing idols and all, but he was restored. He was restored because he repents, and that because he repents, he was also known as one of the king. God was listening to his prayer, and his prayer was received in eternity, and he was a faithful king also. Then came Ammon, which is very small about him. We don't know. He did what was evil. They say only in this text, he did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. When we say what was evil in the sight of the Lord, in the Second Chronicles, we can say that it is always about apostasy. It is always about living in a life where they would try to take the influence from others. Then came this King Josiah. This king is a very important king because he started the Reformation again, which Manasseh was doing. Okay, he was also very much evil. Manasseh, he was bringing out everything, destroy everything, but luckily he repents. But what was done by Manasseh, Josiah reformed. Okay, and one of the things that he reformed is the book of the law. He built the temple, and then he also started this book of the law. He discovered the book of the law, and based on those books of the law, which means he was giving importance to the law of God. He was trying to rule the nation based on the principle of God, on the principle based on the Exodus 20, which was held by the prophet Huldah. Then we have as you know, that we have the Passover, and you know the Passover is always a kind of a reformation, a kind of a remembrance to every reformation of the history of Israel. And then we have the death of his, which it's a very, we call it, if you want to know this death, we call it as a kind of a self-suicide. We don't know for what reason that he went to Egypt. Okay, he went and fight his Pharaoh Necho. Is it because he thinking himself that he is too, too good? It's not clear in this book, neither in Kings also. But he just went there and he was like self-suicide. He was killed by this Pharaoh Necho, and there we can see it's the death of Josiah. And then we have from there the four kings that reigns Judah. We have Jehoiash, Jehoiakim, Jehoiachin, Zedekiah. Now, very interesting. Okay, if you want to know Jeremiah, listen to me. Okay, if you want to know Jeremiah's background, read this story of Josiah and along with these four kings. In fact, five. Okay, there's four kings and one governor, Gedaliah. Okay, this is actually the whole background of Jeremiah, beginning with Josiah. When it comes to these four kings, it is a history, we can say, a history of disorder. You know why? I remember when I was listening to the lecture of Walter Brueggemann, if you count those years, if you minus those years, it's just only 30 years, beginning from Josiah. Can you imagine? Within 30 years, we have five kings, which means it shows a history of what? Disorder. Okay, we have Jehoiash. Jehoiash was actually, he rules 23-year-old, but he was taken by Egypt. Egypt was also another power during that time who start to rise in power, and they want to influence, but he was against Egypt, but Egypt wants over Judah. Okay, and then they take Jehoiash, and then they bring Jehoiakim. Jehoiakim, his name was actually first the other one, and then Jehoiakim again was taken by Babylon. See, it was so much. Okay, the tension during that time. Judah also is in tension. Internal problem is there because of the idolatry that they have, the apostasy that they have. Then there is another political tension because Egypt also tried to rise up. Babylon also tried to rise up. Judah also tried to, live their own life. Because if you look at this history, you will see that there are three groups of people. Number one is those people, okay, those people in the history of Israel where they don't want to have any relation with Babylon, neither Egypt. The number two is that those people who wants to relate themselves with Babylon. Mostly Jeremiah is that, okay, Jeremiah is that book, that kind of a book. And then there is Ezekiel. Ezekiel was the person who doesn't want to have any relation with any kingdom. But there are also other people who wants with the Egypt. Okay, the Egypt. So that's what, there is always a tension here. And then this four kings is a history of tension. So as you all know that the Second Chronicles ends with what? Ends with the fall of Jerusalem. To whom? To Babylon. It is all because of the tensions in the history of these four kings. Okay, and then it also ends with the Edict of Cyrus, which is during the time of Persians. Now, to clear with all the things that I have already talked about the structure, you will clear here the historical and the cultural context. Now, we said that the Chronicles or Ezra is the writer. You should know that the book of Second Chronicle is a reflection on the history and culture of the United Kingdom. As a history, you should know that it is a history and a culture of United Kingdom of Israel, mostly with Solomon, okay, extensively with Solomon. And from there, it has a divided kingdom, as I told you. They had a problem, and it focused mostly on Judah and Southern Kingdom. Then during the Solomon Kingdom, we can see he reigned for about 40 years. Which is a history of what? It all talks about the history of fulfilling the promise of God to David. What is that paradigm of fulfilling God? the promise of God to David is the temple. And you will see that he did that with wisdom. What kind of wisdom? He has a military, okay, power. He has an economy, treaty with King Hiram of Tyre. Then he have a religion culture temple. Okay, he has a religion. He built with the wisdom for the religion, which is the temple. Out of that treaty, out of that power, and that he made the temple as what? As an institution with riches. Why I say it is with riches? Because remember, it is full of goals, full of all the good things within the temple. But it doesn't end up there. It is also an institution of prayer. It is also an institution of prayer and also the institution of identity. Where do we find that idea of identity? It is with the ark. This you will see mostly when we talk about Ezra. When we talk about Ezra, you will see this one. So in the divided kingdom, you will see that the timeline, it is about 3 centuries, almost to the 3 centuries, 3, which means 300 years above and less than 4. But it is a history of what? It is a history of disaster. It starts with forced labor by Solomon. Because of that forced labor, there is what? There is a problem. And then it is what? It is a history of military expansion. Mostly there is a war. Okay, there is war in this history, fighting against the Edomite, fighting against Aram, fighting against Israel, fighting against Assyria. And there is another thing, there is a treaty. Or what is the problem of a treaty, which is alliance? There is apostasy. You see, how do we see this apostasy here? Remember that I told you it is because of the marriage. Yeah, it is because of the marriage. And when they have this marriage with intercultural marriage, there is an influence. Okay, there is an influence that they try to bring on. These kings try to bring on upon the temple of Israel or the religion aspects of Israel. And that's what we see that if we look about the cultural condition, it is the way of the monarchs. This history of Second Chronicle is the way of the monarchs, power and wealth. It is when we talk about the ways of the people, common people, it is oppression. The fact that I'm saying oppression is all because of only the first labor, but it is also a history of cultural influence. What does it mean when I say cultural influence? It is a history where of that alliance, okay, of that marriage, of that treaty. When you have a culture influence, I don't know whether you have went to a place called, this international border. I came out from that particular state where I came from Northeast India, where we do have this, what we call international border with Bangladesh. And my village is just next to Bangladesh. And in that area of border, there is a lot of cultural influence from the language. We can speak, language is one of the cultural influence. And then there's a lot of things that the people can follow and bring up to the other different part of the, the society as a whole. But mostly in the history of Israel, it is about affecting the temple. It affects the temple. Why? Because it is an institution of identity and it is an institution of prayer. Now, what is the theological theme from the Second Chronicles? It is always about the temple. Okay, it is always about the temple, which we will find mostly during the time of Solomon. And that is the institution of prayer, sacrifice, offerings. And that sacrifice and offerings, if we talk about the prayers in today's world, it's about confession and thanksgiving. When you go to the temple, you confess yourself. Why did I say that one? Because God himself say, if you do it with humility, pray and seek, I will hear you and I will bless the whole land. That is what we can find in Second Chronicles. Okay, we can find in Second Chronicles chapter 9, chapter 7, which is the response of God. He said that confess yourself. It is about self-denial. And when you confess yourself, you give thanks to God because God will always will always listen and he will always intervene your problem. But another theological theme that we found in the Second Chronicles is that it is a book of retribution. What does it mean by retribution? It is a book of cause and effect, which means, how did this cause and effect happen? It has happened because the people are misusing the identity. The people of Judah are misusing the identity. Actually, the kings are misusing the identity. There is a cultural influence in the form of apostasy, I said. Okay, there is this cultural influence in the form of apostasy, and the effect of it is death, which is sword and disease. You see, Asa, he died out of sword, and then other kings we can see from a bowel, from other diseases they died, which means what? Don't play around with God. This is the theological theme also that we need to we need to understand about God, that there is always cause and effect when you misuse the identity of God, which is the image of God. We human are the image of God. Now, what is the relation that I want to bring to the New Testament? I want to bring this relation from a gospel worldview, looking from Jesus. I want to say that Jesus is the embodiment of the temple. When I say embodiment of the temple, which means Jesus has this quality of the temple. What is that? Remember that the temple is a place of kings. Okay, they are the place of the kings also. Solomon addressed. Okay, but as a king, Jesus also listens. He listens to the pain of the people. Okay, he listens to the pain of the people, and for the fact of listening, why did he do that? Is that he will bring justice and righteousness. Jehoshaphat did this. He listens to he listens to the pain of the people, and that's what he bring. What? Judges. And when he bring these judges, he was able to bring justice and righteousness to the people. He was able to rule this quality of God with justice and righteousness. The second thing is that Jesus is a prophet. He's a God. He's a God like what? Who transformed the king from being God. We can see that there are many prophets. Zechariah, we can see Micaiah, we can see many prophets within this book. They are the people who transform the king, many kings, okay, from being gods. What does it mean? What does it mean? That they try to make themselves as important, so much importance. They try to make themselves that there is no other God beyond them. But that's not the case with the temple as an identity, as an institution of identity, as the institution of the ark. Because in the ark, as I told you, there is this tablets of Moses. What it contains in the tablets of Moses? The first principle, it says, you shall not have any other gods before me. And that's the reason that these people are there. Jesus Christ as a prophet also transformed the king from being gods, which means he transformed us also from thinking ourselves as the best, because we have God who is above us, who is above all. I think I will leave the questions later. I will go directly with the book of Ezra. Is it okay to do that, or do you want to have questions? If you have a question, you can just put in the book in the chat box. I think that is better, I guess. Okay, when we talk about Ezra, I'll move a bit further because we have only 15 minutes. I'll go faster a bit. Traditionally, the authorship of Ezra, we don't know. Okay, this book also we actually don't know, because you can see that some call it is the book of the Chronicles. It is the book written by the Chroniclers, and some said no, it is Ezra. The people who said that it is Ezra is because there is in the book of Ezra there is this I, this what we call as the first person reference, and then whereas for the people who call that it is written by the chroniclers, it is because of the concluding note to the importance of the temple. They said it is because the book of Ezra also has its importance in the temple. It talks about the theology of the temple, so that's what it must be, the chroniclers who have wrote it. But as I've said, the authorship is uncertain in terms of authorship, but it leaves us with no reason to study. Okay, it leaves us with no reason to study on why the book exists and its importance. So we need to look why the book exists and it's important, rather than concerning about the authorship, whether it's Ezra or chroniclers. Doesn't matter much, because it is there. The book is already there for us to to bring out the importance of faith in our life. When we talk about that, there is a structure, and that structure is two major sections in the book of Ezra. There is a first section, there is a second section. The first section, it talks about the return and the rebuilding of the temple. And the second section, it talks about the Ezra return and reformation. In the return and rebuilding of the temple, we will find that it constitutes of chapter 1 and chapter 2 till chapter 6. Okay, where under this structure, under this return and rebuilding the temple, we have a Cyrus degree. It begins with a Cyrus degree. What is that Cyrus degree? Now, listen to me. This is very interesting. Cyrus is the king of Persia. Okay. Now, the Persian kingdom comes after the Babylonian. Okay, after the Babylonian kingdom, which means the time of Chronicles and Ezra, it's very long because we don't have this history of Babylon within the First Chronicles and within the book of Ezra. So, but the book of Ezra comes after only when the Persians are already there. When the Persians invade they won over the battle against the Babylonian. Actually, they don't won against the battle. The people of Babylon himself, if you read carefully, the people of Babylon himself just submit to Cyrus. Why? Now, we don't know for what reason, but we think that Cyrus, in the Cyrus degree, it says this one. It says that they believe in this ideology of plurality. Everybody should live. Okay, everybody should have their own culture. Everybody should think in their ways. But the one thing about the Persian is that in terms of economy, they still ask from the people. Okay, even the Judah also, even Jerusalem also, they have to pay tributes. When we say tributes, means taxes to Persia. Okay, they still have to pay taxes to Persia, but they can live their own way. They can have their own culture. They can do whatever you do. They have that, what we call the ideology of plurality, the ideology of diversity. So with that edict, with that Cyrus degree or the Cyrus edict, the response of the exilic committee is that they said, we will go and return back to the land. And that's what the next chapter we have is that there is a list of returnees, okay, of returned exile. And then when they return there, they rebuild the temple. Okay, this is the first return. Okay, the first return. They rebuilt the temple, which is the first return. They said that the first return was under the king, under the priest, okay, the priest known as Zerubbabel. Okay, under the priest known as Zerubbabel. So they rebuilt the temple beginning from chapter 3. And how they do this temple, they start to lay foundation. Okay, they start laying the foundation again, those measurement and all these things they are doing again. They're giving importance again. They appoint the Levites. They start this appointing again. Who is the priest? Who will be the Levites? Who will be the other workers of the house of God? So that is the foundation that is being laid. Then there is a story of resistance again. Very interesting, even in Ezra. There is a story of resistance. What does it mean by resistance? It means there is a people who revolt against the temple. Now, who are these people who revolt against the temple? The fact that these people revolt against the temple, we call it as those people in the land. Okay, remember the people in the land. Now, I'll tell you a story. Why do we call it a people in the land? Remember that when Babylon, there is 3 deportations that they take out. You will find this one in the Jeremiah, okay, in Jeremiah, book of Jeremiah. There are 3 deportations that Babylon take out the people from Judah to Babylon. And when they take out these people, they take out only those people who are what? Who are the ruling part of the society. When you understand, when we say ruling part of the society, which means only the king, the queens, the priests, and all those who are involved in bureaucrats, they take out only them. The reason many scholars said it's because of that this called thing, the 4 kings. Okay, the 4 kings make a lot of chaos, and that's what Babylon said. Enough is enough. We will take them to Babylon only. So, whereas the people, the common people, okay, they live in the land. Be sure of this. Not all people of Israel, not all people of Judah, when the Babylon came, take them to Babylon. No, it is only the ruling people that they take out from Babylon, from Judah to Babylon, whereas the common people are there. Okay, they stay in the land. So these people who revolt in Ezra is said to believe that they are those people who are staying in the land. Okay, they are said to believe that they are people who stays in the land, but the rejection, the resistance against the temple can be seen mostly because of Zerubbabel. He rejected them. He said, "We don't want to build temple with you." I'm not saying this just because I'm saying it, because if you look at chapter 4, verse 3, you will see that. We reject. We don't want to build the house of God, but we alone build the house of the God of Israel. The rejection is there, and that's what there is a resistance against the temple. So anyhow, these people who said this Zerubbabel party, we can call, they restore the temple, okay, with the help of whom? Haggai and Zechariah, the prophets of temples we call. And then they also helped by Darius, okay, this is very important. After Cyrus come King Darius, okay. They are also being helped by King Darius, and there they start the Passover again. When there is a restoration of the temple, there will always be a Passover, which is the celebration. And then we have another section, which is Ezra's returns and reformation. Now, Ezra returns and reformation we can find in chapter 7 and chapter 8. His return was actually by the command, we can say, if not the command, at least by the suggestions of this king of Persia known as Artaxerxes. Okay, he gave authority to Ezra. Okay, the authority to Ezra to do what? To establish Mosaic law, which we will find from chapter 7, 1 to 8, 1 to 28. The reason that he gave this authority to establish Mosaic law is because there is a lot of tension. Okay, there is a lot of tension in this restoration of the temple, because these people who revolt, they even wrote against the Persia. They even wrote, they tried to cause a lot of problem because they were not allowed to build the temple along. It is just because of the rejection of Jerusalem. This Zerubbabel, okay, that's what there is a lot of tension. So, and when they have that the tension, that's what Ezra came in. He came in with a reformation. He returned with the power from Artaxerxes to establish the Mosaic law, and he journeyed it. Okay, he took with them. This is a second journey. Okay, the second returning. Ezra is a second returning. The third returning is Nehemiah. Okay, you will look at the book of Nehemiah later. So they start a journey. They went for fasting and prayer and for protection. They looked for the servant for the temple, and then they were bringing gifts also for the temple. And when they returned to Jerusalem, when they reached Jerusalem, they start the reformation of Ezra. What is that reformation of Ezra? The first reformation of Ezra, when he was trying to establish the Mosaic law, is that he denounced intermarriage, which means there is no intermarriage, intercultural marriage. He denounced exogamy, we can say. And then, okay, what is there? The people agree. When we say the people agree here, mostly it is those only the Zerubbabel party, they agree, okay? Or even there are priests also who doesn't agree. There are priests who doesn't agree at all. And then what is happening? There is another rejection, implicated list. When I say implicated list, we can find that there is another rejection. And that you can see from chapter 10, verses 18 to 44, that if you don't denounce intermarriage, you are rejected. And there is a long list from 18. They were found of descendants of the priests who have married foreign women, and for them, they have been rejected. So this book of Ezra is a book of reformation. He gave authority to the Mosaic law, but the beginning of that reformation is by denouncing intermarriage, which the outcome of it leads to rejection, another rejection. So this is the structure that we have in the book of Ezra. So we have the historical and the cultural context. What is the historical and the cultural context of Ezra? Is another book of reflection, we can say, that occurred during the kingdom of Persia. Okay, during the kingdom, the context of the kingdom of Persia, that is the broader context. Whereas in the immediate context, it happens in Jerusalem. The timeline of it is from 586 BCE to 424 BCE. This is only with Ezra, okay? Only with Ezra, not with Nehemiah. And then we need to understand that during this time, Judah or Jerusalem is a vassal state. What does it mean by a vassal state? It means that they are the state who are being overlooked or who have been looked by or reigned by the Persian rule. They are still the people who are under the Persian rule because of what? Paying treaty to the Persian rule, paying taxes to the Persian rule, even though they can live under their own culture, under their own religious idea. But it is a history of conflict. Remember that the idea of Samaritan comes here. The people of the land were considered as the Samaritans. Okay, they are the people who are impure. So if people ask you where is the history of the Samaritan comes from, it starts actually from the Assyrians. Okay, it starts actually from the Assyrians against when they fought against Israel. But in the south, in the Judah kingdom or the southern kingdom, it starts with this time of Ezra. The Samaritans are actually what? They are the people who are impure, which the returnees considered it in that way. So there is a conflict between these people of the land, which is the Samaritan, and the returnees, which is the people of the ruling class of Israel from Babylon. So the reason of the conflict is because of the temple again. I think the reason of this, the probability is because they are afraid of the cultural influence. Again, the cultural influence out of what? Out of the apostasy, right? There are a lot of apostasy because of what? Intermarriage, inter this treaty exchange and all, which is the alliance. And that's what there is a time of the Ezra has to do away with this, denounce the intermarriage, denounce exogamy. Now I used to think why Ezra denounced exogamy is because when you start a marriage, then you start a family, right? We remember in an ethic class, we were taught that to start a family, to start a society, there is always a start first of marriage. And after the marriage comes the family, and the family becomes a part of the society. And within the society, there are different aspects. One aspect that it will touch, it is that it will touch the temple. But what is the outcome of this idea of denouncing the marriage? There is a segregation. There is a total rejection again. There is conflict. It doesn't end in something good. It ends with what we call as segregation. So what do we learn from here? What do we learn? What are the theological themes that we need to learn from the book of Ezra? That it is the book of temple. They always focus on the temple, but it is as an institution of identity. Okay, it is an institution of identity in which that foundation has an on the Ark of Covenant. It gives importance to the Mosaic law, the Sinai covenant. This is very important with Ezra. This is nicely the thing that I love about Ezra, that he gives importance to the Mosaic law, the Sinai covenant, the covenant where we find in Exodus 20. Okay, but this is the problem here. He tried to build nationalism from this Mosaic law. And that nationalism is this nationalism of segregation. He was actually trying to build, he will be good if he tried to build nationality. Okay, a kind of a national character. Okay, that will build a character, that will build a quality towards those people. But sadly, it ends up in segregation that we cannot deny in Ezra. And the problem, I think it is the problem with the interpretation on the Mosaic law, that it leads to nationalism, it leads to culturalism. When we say an ism, it means, that extremity is there, that two extremity is there. But had he interpreted to live a life to be different and not rejection, it would have been interesting for Ezra. But I think the whole aspects of it is because of maybe of this apostasy, this cultural influence So which we can find right in the part of Ezra also, because there is too much of this cultural influence, that's what he might have denounced intermarriage. But it will be interesting also if he had do that in the time by interpreting a life to be different. What is the relation to the New Testament from the gospel view? I'm not talking from Paul or something, but I'm talking only about the gospel worldview. Again, when we talk about the gospel worldview, I talk about Jesus Christ, which is the embodiment of the temple, as I said. But this time, the embodiment of the temple Jesus Christ represents is the priest. Okay, as a priest, as a God who embraces differences. Why did I say he embraces differences? Jesus Christ as the priest. The fact that I'm saying he's a priest is because Ezra himself also is a scribe and also a priest. He is a descendant of Aaron. He is also a priest. But what is the difference between them? Is that Jesus Christ embraced differences. What does it mean when I say embrace differences? Think about the story of the Good Samaritan. Isn't he embracing Samaritan? He said the Good Samaritan. Why did he do that? Because he wants to uphold this thing, a life of not rejection, but a life with love. Right? Why did I say love? Because Jesus himself said, what is the greatest commandment, was asked by the disciple. What was Jesus replied? Love. One word. Love your God with all your heart, your mind, and your soul, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. One word, love. See, this is the difference. If we look with people from this idea, from Ezra, I think we will build a nationality with love. But at the same time, we will also remind ourselves that there will be always influence. Sometimes those influence can create us being evil. Okay, that cannot deny. But if we uphold a life of being different, that is to uphold the principle of God. By hold this principle of love, I think we can change the world. With love, we can really change the world. We can embrace anything, but we will be the embodiment of love. You and me will be the embodiment of love. I want to end up by reminding you all what Paul says, that you are the temple of, this body is a temple of God. And we see these theological themes of temple. And we will end by saying that we will be the institution of identity. What identity? The community of love. The community that will embrace difference and uphold love towards others. And also we will be the community of what? The community of prayer. Confess, because we are people who are full of mistakes. We confess because we believe that God listens, right? And we will do that with humility. And at the same time, we will give thanks to God because He's the God who listens and also the God who intervenes. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Timothy, for the wonderful session. You have almost covered three books today. So now I leave it to the students who would like to ask any questions to the lecture for today's lecture. You may unmute and ask your questions now. I have enabled the microphone.
Yes. Thank you very much for the lesson today, and God bless you for so much for being able to cover up to 3 books. I think it's been very, very important, and we've been able to explain certain dynamics of the 3 books. My question has to do with it. After the division between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, and the influence of apostasy upon the southern kingdom from the northern kingdom. Was there a way, or because fine, God has instructed that they shouldn't intermarry with other religious side, but was there a way, if maybe God had not instructed them, or God has instructed them, for them to stay put to maybe those from Judah marry only those from Judah, and then the Israelites who were into apostasy also married themselves? Because from this lesson, we gathering that it is the intermarriages that brought the apostasy. I don't know whether you get me.
If I can infer from your question, is that whether intermarriages is really the problem of that can lead to this problem of apostasy, right?
Yes, looking
See,
at the
yeah,
between Judah
yeah,
and Israel.
yeah. See, I'll say this like this: that intermarriages is not a problem. Okay, it's not at all a problem. I don't see it as a problem, but the problem is that if you have a cultural influence towards, towards the temple, the thing is like this, because as Christians, as as teacher of Old Testament, I used to say this one thing is this, is that we are called by God to be different.
Yes.
Daniel is one, right? You see the book of Daniel, he doesn't want to eat anything. He wants to remain something different. But in that differences, in that being different, we have to uphold the principle of love. That is still we have to love others. So we need to see a balanced thing. Okay, that is what I think. If I mean, like, do you want to come back for that, or it's clear? I mean, like, did I answer your question?
Oh yeah, yes, yes, because I was looking at the influence of Judah by the Israeli by the Israelites who were into idol worship. Yeah, so that's where I was picking it from the dynamics. Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Yes, but and one other lesson that I have also learned from that, I'm looking at the books from the Chronicles, the life period of the kingship. I also realized that if those kings who were able to obey God and that they stay put to God had a lasting kingship for years, 40 years, 30 years, 20 years. But those who couldn't obey God and they were sinful had very short lives. They had very short span, maybe 1 year, 5 years, few years that that were supposed they couldn't live long. So in our obedience to God can also prolong our lifespan into whatever thing that God says us to do, or what He says, the prosperity or anything that He blesses us with. Obedience is a major factor.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Yeah, I can say that there is this thing what we call today in this world that is cause and effect. If you do it right, you will get it right. If you do wrong, make sure you will also face the consequences of the problem of you being wrong. So that is the retribution we call. I don't know if I have to say this one. Actually, we are living in a postmodern world where we say there's relativity, but still this cause and effect is very much there. Okay, so don't play around with God. And I used to say that the second Chronicles chapter 7 is the best paradigm of seeing that if you play around with God, He will play around with you also. So I think, be careful about it. When you say your words to God that you will be perfect, try to be perfect. We know we are not human. Humans are not perfect, but we will try to do it because He gave us a chance to confess in the institution of prayer, right? The temple as an institution of prayer. You can go there and pray and confess. And with humility, He will listen and intervene to you. With our humility, He will listen and intervene and give you chance. And that's what we also can infer here is the God of the second chance, the God of many chance, not just a second chance, of many chance. If we, we turn to Him, I guess. Anything more? If not, then Sister Michelle, yeah.
Looking at it, do we have anyone else? Okay, so thank you, Brother Timothy, for
Thanks to you.
today's lessons, and God bless you. I'd like to welcome Sister Rebecca from Malaysia to close with a closing prayer.
Let's pray. Father, I thank you, Lord Father, for your word, Lord Jesus. Lord, I pray that, Lord Father, that as we confess, Lord Father, Lord, and Lord Father, you will intervene, Lord Father, and you will bless us through, Lord Father, because you are abounding in love, Lord. And Father, I thank you, Jesus, for the word, Lord Father. Help us to walk in faith, Lord Father, and know that, Lord Father, you are a true God, Lord Father. In you, Lord Father, we have everlasting and eternal life, Lord. Thank you. Thank you for the word that you have shared through Pastor Brother Timothy. And Lord, thank you for the Vineyard Ministry, and thank you to Reverend Jasmine and her team. Lord, thank you for the avenue that you have prepared for us to learn about your word, Lord Father, which bring nourishment to the body of Christ, Lord Master. Lord, I commit, Lord Father, each and every student in this group, Lord Father, that we will be focused to the word and to your calling. And Lord Father, that you will Lord, will use us, Lord Father, as an instrument, Lord Father, for the expansion of your kingdom. Lord, we submit everything to your hand. In Jesus' name, I ask and pray. Amen.
Man, thank you, thank you. So the assignment questions will be posted soon, and also the notes as well. So good night, everyone, and good morning or good afternoon. Have a blessed weekend, and Shabbat Shalom.